Thanks for coming back. Here are the world news headlines. Scaling Greece's debt mountain. Historic Iran deal hits oil prices. Stage 1 of a deal may have kept Greece in the euro for now, but capital controls remain in place. And every day, Greeks feel powerless. 84-year-old pensioner Konstantinos had this to say.
I have 3 children and 2 grandchildren. That makes 7, including us. How can we live with 50 euros a day? The state must open the banks so we can take our money. We are suffering.
The European Central Bank has been keeping Greek banks afloat by giving 89 billion euros of emergency liquidity assistance, or ELA. But it's also owed money from previous bailouts, and a 3.5 billion euro repayment is due. Jeremy Stretch is head of FX strategy at CIBC, and this is what he had to say.
If that bond repayment is not made on Monday, July 20th, then the ECB, I think, will be duty-bound to ask for the repayment of that ELA assistance, and ultimately that would trigger the collapse of the Greek banking system. So that bond repayment is absolutely integral to the maintenance of Greece within the Eurozone. There's
little chance the ECB will be able to bend the rules. Germany's Bundesbank, for one, would oppose. And even if the payment is made, sorting out the bank's longer term after months of crisis will be an incredible challenge. Eurogroup finance ministers estimate they'll need about 25 billion euros. The sector is likely to be revamped, with 4 main banks possibly becoming 2. It all makes Greece's debt even more unsustainable. And that, says Stretch, is the elephant in the room.
And it is still a case that there is going to be some reprofiling on the table. So that's probably going to be a further extension of debt maturities into the middle to long distance, as well as any potential easing in some of those finance levels. But we're not yet at a scenario where anybody is prepared to accept that the money that is being lent is not going to come back in its entirety.
Another 5 billion euros will need to be repaid on August 20th. And if Athens can get even that far, would a Greek default begin to recede? But it's still a huge if. It's taking close to a decade of on and off negotiations with Iran to reach an agreement over its nuclear program. But there's finally a deal. EU Foreign Policy Chief Federica Mogherini had this to say.
It is a decision that can open the way to a new chapter in international relations and show that diplomacy, coordination, cooperation can overcome decades of tensions.
The prospect of more oil being available hit prices. U.S. crude dropped more than $1 to just over $51 a barrel. And Brent crude futures tumbled 95 cents to just under $57. Jeremy Stretch, head FX strategy CIBC, had this to say.
You overlay that with OPEC also reducing demand expectations, and I think inevitably that does suggest that the oil price is going to soften a little bit further, at least in the short term. That's bad news, of course, for those oil producers, but it's good news for consumers.
Iran currently exports just over 1 million barrels of oil a day, half what it did before sanctions, and were predicted to increase by 60% within a year. U.S. officials also say Iran will eventually get access to more than $100 billion in frozen assets.
We're going to see the removal of sanctions, and not just in the oil market, but particularly in the energy sector. Then we will see a flow of funds coming back into the domestic market. Of course, the removal of sanctions and the embargo potentially opens the way for some degree of inward investment, and I think that's going to be hugely significant.
Sanctions have been in place since 1979. They'll be lifted gradually on only if Iran complies with the terms of the agreement. That includes enabling international inspectors access to all nuclear sites. There are still a number of fundamental issues to be resolved, but the agreement to restrict Iran's nuclear enrichment program is historic. It's the biggest country to rejoin the global economy since post-communist Eastern Europe in the early 1990s. Drivers of car transporting trailers demonstrated outside a Volkswagen plant near Sao Paulo, Brazil on Monday, following the car producer stating it was seeking new ways to contract out the transportation of new cars to dealers. The truck drivers utilized their car-carrying trailers to block a lane of highway in front of the plant in the city of São Bernardo Campo from about 7 a.m. local time throughout most of the afternoon. The forced lane closure caused traffic issues on the Anchieta Highway, which links the city of Sao Paulo with the Atlantic coast. The National Union of Car Transporting Truckers said Volkswagen attempts to replace logistics companies who transport finished cars from plants and storage facilities to dealers could cost the union thousands of jobs. This movement is because Volkswagen, after more than 50 years of our work, now wants to cut our work and give it to a single company. The president of the National Union of Car Transporting Truckers, Jose Ronaldo, said, "We are a total of about 3,500 third-party companies, and they, Volkswagen, want to make this change. Use the service of just one company," Ronaldo added. Volkswagen Brazil released a statement stating it was analyzing services and price points for the transportation of finished vehicles, adding that the company would respect contractual obligations. The truckers' union has said the protest would continue on Tuesday unless Volkswagen negotiated with the logistic companies. Today, Nairobi's Westgate Mall looks like this. Business owners are busy stocking shelves and putting up displays. They're in hopes of erasing the images that flashed around the world in September of 2013. Members of the Islamic group Al-Shabaab took over the mall, occupying it for days and killing dozens of employees and shoppers. This woman here says she hid in the kitchen during the attack, where she could hear the gunshots. As she fled the building, she says she passed many bodies, including those of some of her co-workers. Now, business owners are hoping to convince shoppers that the mall is safe again. The reopening comes as Nairobi prepares to play host to U.S. President Barack Obama. Nairobi Governor Evans Kidero referred to the visit as proof that the city is safe once again. Nairobi Governor Evans Kidero had this to say.
I would like to appeal to Nairobians, let's turn out on Saturdays and come and shop, because Kenya is safer than ever. If it wasn't, Obama would not be coming.
Business owners are hoping residents are listening and that the mall sales will head upwards again. For less than €250,000, you could be your own warden. This small town in central Poland is placing its centuries-old prison on the market. Although a bit lacking in amenities, it's definitely rich with local history. The complex was originally a monastery during the Spanish Inquisition, which was later converted into a prison in the 18th century. It's a place with a cruel history, says Lexika Regional Museum Director Andrzej Baruki.
In this prison, there were notorious criminals with very long and hard sentences, political prisoners, and people who were sent here during World War II and later exterminated the Jewish people. This prison illustrates a dramatic 200 years of Polish history.
The property comes with everything that was left behind by those who stayed here prior to the prison closing down in 2006. Before it was put on the market, the abandoned prison served as a venue for art and film projects. But locals discovered that it was too expensive to maintain. Though the cells might be tight, a local official suggests some renovations might just make prison a place to call home. Strawberry farmers in Russia have become the unintended benefactors of the conflict in Ukraine. Russia banned imports of European produce following Europe imposed economic sanctions on Russia because of the conflict. Farmers in the western Russian enclave of Kaliningrad suddenly had buyers clamoring for their products. Growers realized the time was right for new investment. Shopkeepers like Natalia say the amount of local produce quickly soared. Salesperson at Kaliningrad Market, Natalia, stated the producers have started building greenhouses. In just over 1 year, I have gone from 4 local suppliers to 8. But shoppers complain the expansion hasn't been enough to fill local market baskets. A local resident, Marina, stated there are no potatoes, nothing. I ask, what is that related to? And the saleswomen say sanctions. Nothing is delivered. Russian officials say the ban will remain in place on European products as long as the Western sanction against Russia continues. So Russia growers can rest assured shoppers will continue lining up to buy their produce. And they're off, running through the narrow streets of Pamplona. The Fighting Bulls raced in their 8th and final run of the 2015 San Fermin Festival on July 14th. Both the bulls and the runners seem to be at the top of their game, as 6 bulls broke the speed record at 2 minutes and 5 seconds. That's 6 seconds faster than that of 2011's record. Some runners took a tumble. Thankfully, no one was gored. Only a few injuries were reported. It is the excitement of the race that keeps many runners coming back for more. Martin Label, a runner, had this to say.
It's hard to describe, really. It's just the excitement and the build-up, and then looking over to see the bulls just coming through, and the adrenaline. It's incredible. It's unreal.
Arya Dudge, another runner, had this to say.
I love it. I love it. We've run today is my 79th NCRO since 2004. It's wonderful. We run every day we're here. I was gored in 2012 and ran the next day. It was wonderful. We had a great time.
The event was made famous by Ernest Hemingway in his novel, The Sun Also Rises. And come sunset, the bulls participate in an evening of bullfight. Following are the weather and New York Stock Exchange reports. Thank you for watching VBS TV Business News Edition. We hope our program has been helpful to you. Until tomorrow, this is Rachel Dares saying goodbye.